Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Richie.
Welcome to the new season of the Business Leaders Consortium. We are super excited that we're still going. For those of you that have been doing this for a little while, you know that this started off as a year-long journey where we were trying to do some cool things for business owners. And for those of you that are new to the room, just know that we do cool things with business owners. A bunch of like-minded people that have come together to basically hold each other up, bring ideas to the table, network with each other, and just provide great resources to each other as business owners, leaders, and those that ultimately serve us. We are starting our new year. We made a point this year to change the focus from being a situation where we were teaching to where we were going to try and inspire a little bit more, and lead through inspiration and through great stories and other successes that we see around us. And so I'm so grateful and actually truly excited that Angel Martinez is going to join us this morning. So as we sat down and planned out our next year, we decided we want some people that Santa Barbara community knows, that we can potentially, ultimately create a bigger buzz for what we're doing, because this is such an important thing to me and to those of us that are bringing it to you. So I was so excited to actually have an opportunity, and we all thought, hey, this is great, because here's this amazing business leader, somebody everybody knows, right, and doing great things in this town. Oh, and by the way, he happens to be kind of in the spotlight right now through some other things that he's doing in our community. Like, what if we happen to say, hey, we've got this great stage, come and talk to some business leaders about your story, and by the way, it probably wouldn't hurt to get a little extra exposure. And when you talk about the kind of business leader that Angel is, he said, he's like, Rich, because we don't even need to talk about that. I would have done this in a heartbeat, just simply because of the room that you're asking me to talk to. This is my passion, right? This is where I started, right? And so to that point in this introduction, before we get started, Angel started by running a specialty running swim, right? He's a runner, he's an athlete, he's a distance runner. By the way, you should ask him how quickly he's run some of these distance races. It's pretty darn impressive. But he went from there to being one of the original founders of Reebok, right? And so by pumping up your shoes, I'm hoping he's going to pump us up a little bit this morning. You guys remember that? And then ultimately, as we know him here in Santa Barbara, as the former CEO of Deckers, right? Growing an international global brand into something that's actually super cool today, right? And really meaningful, and it's kind of stepped beyond, again, no pun intended, but stepped beyond the riverbed, right? Where we used to hang out as kids, and do bad things, be cool in our Uggs, right? Now it's actually socially acceptable to be wearing these cool things he's doing to me. So anyways, I don't want to talk any more about this. I did sit down with Angel before this, and we talked about some of the things that he's going to talk about today. And I got to tell you, his story is genuinely inspiring, and something that every single one of us as business owners and leaders are going to walk out of this room feeling better about ourselves, and we're going to go do something great today. So no further ado, Angel, if you could please lead and inspire.
Thank you. Take off my jacket. So I really want to thank you all for getting up early to come here this morning. What Rich and I talked about, really at the core of it all, I realized, and Rich realized, was really an important component of any business success, which is relationships. And I'm going to talk more about that, but let me just give you a little timeline, if you will, or a little bit of background, because it's truly almost miraculous that I'm standing here talking to you, because it only happens in America. It doesn't happen in any other place on earth at all. I was a little kid. I came from Cuba when I was 3 years old. I was adopted by my grandmother's sister and her husband, and they left Cuba in 1958. And by 1959, Fidel rolled into Havana, and 61, the Bay of Pigs, and 62, the missile crisis, and I didn't see my parents or my sister or my brother for 34 years. And we lived in the Bronx, in the South Bronx. It was I didn't know it was the South Bronx. To me, it was just the Bronx. But then that movie came out, Fort Apache, The Bronx, with Paul Newman, and it was my neighborhood, and they're calling it the South Bronx, and I said, oh, okay, that must be where I'm from. And wow, what a dangerous place. But when you're a kid, it's home. It's just what you grow up knowing. I thought the whole world was like that. Thank God it's not, but certainly not Santa Barbara. And in the end, I would also say to you that everything I needed to know about people I learned in the Bronx from age 3 to age 13. Every kind of person I would ever meet in life, I met in the Bronx from age 3 to 13. And you know, this is sort of, there's been several books, one called Pattern Recognition, which you might want to check out. And it's just about how you piece a life or a point of view or a perspective or an ethic together. And it's about components, you know, you piece it together, and then over time you start recognizing, wow, there's a pattern to this. So people have asked me over the years, you know, how do you project what the market might be doing as a consumer market, et cetera? It's this ability to put a pattern together, kind of read tea leaves, I suppose. But I digress. Let me just say as well about growing up in the Bronx. It was also for me an opportunity to experience what America gives people like me is opportunity. So all through my young life as a kid, my guardian, his name was Albert O'Neill, Irish-Cuban, grew up in Syracuse, New York. Yeah. Spoke English with an upstate New York accent, not a speck of accent of any. I don't think I have an accent, but he had no accent either. And his favorite thing to do was to peck away at his typewriter and write letters to the editor. That was it. I mean, you didn't want to get him going because he had a lot to say. And but he did espouse one very important thing, and that is, this is a country in which opportunity is what is available abundantly, you know. And there may not be enough money sometimes, there may not be enough this sometime or that sometime, but there is always opportunity. And I live by that. I've always lived by that. And my philosophy has been that if I can be in the business of creating opportunity for other people, then I benefit from them pursuing their dream and creating those kind of opportunities. So I've always done everything in business with that intention. That's been my North Star, if you will. The idea that opportunity begets opportunity, and that's the nature of humanity. It's not an economic platform as much as it is a human scale understanding of economics. We all aspire to a better life, a better situation, a better condition, a better series of opportunities for our kids. We all want to see that happen. And so when I, fast forward a few years, we moved to the Bay Area when my guardian's daughter was having a baby, and she wanted her parents there, and I benefited. I got lucky, moved to Alameda, California from the Bronx, New York. It was like moving to Mayberry. I honestly thought, this is serious, I thought there would be wooden sidewalks. I thought it was Andy Griffith's show, and we're moving to Alameda. Do they wear cowboy boots there? So it was, when we got to Alameda, it turned out to be the place where everybody's grandmother lived. I mean, Alameda, it's an island off the coast of Oakland, is what I refer to it as. And it was a wonderful place to have a real sort of small town America in the middle of the Bay Area life, right at the beginning of the summer of love. In April '67 is when we moved there. So, which was a whole nother world altogether from the Bronx. And lucky for me, at some point in high school, my freshman year in high school, I wanted to be an athlete in the worst way. My freshman year in high school, I was 5'4", 111 pounds. I thought I was going to be a major league ball player. What Cuban kid doesn't think they're not going to be a major league ball player? That opportunity didn't present itself, if I may say. I couldn't throw the ball out of the infield. So I started looking around for what other sport I could do. Tried football, believe it or not. We had a flag football team. The first day of practice, Frank Parks, 6 feet tall, in the 8th grade, stepped on my ankle and broke it. After throwing me over his shoulder in a blocking exercise, I weighed 111 pounds. So there was the end of my football career. And then shortly after that, I saw that the the track team was out there, and these guys were running laps. I didn't know they were running laps. I wasn't paying that much attention. I just noticed they were going really slow. I hadn't realized they were on their 13th lap, but I thought, man, these guys are going slow. I can beat these guys. So I decided to go out for the track team. And I was the worst kid on the team by far. You know, finished last in just about every single race until the very, very last race of the track season, right, you know, I think it was mid-May. And all of a sudden, I finished third in the mile. And I got hooked, okay? So there began my opportunity with running. And I remember talking to a kid who trained, he'd run 1,000 miles the previous summer. And he went from being an also-ran to being one of the best kids on the team. This kid ran 10 miles a day, every single day, for 90 days plus, right? And I decided I was going to do that. So between my freshman and my sophomore year, I ran 1,000 miles that summer. And I came back as the #1 kid on the team. And, you know, it just kind of progressed from there. And all through high school, that was my passion. That was my love of running. I was a good student, but I really loved running. And so I went to UC Davis. Luckily, I had running scholarships offers around the country, but I didn't accept any of them. I went to UC Davis, which was no scholarships, but you know, they had student aid, financial aid, whatever. The team was awesome. The coach was awesome. That's where I wanted to be one of those guys. They had long hair and beards. And they were the coolest looking guys out there, you know, so I wanted to be one of those guys. And I had a big afro, which slowed me down probably. So running became something that I was incredibly passionate about, addicted to. I was a running geek. And at some point in college, something started to happen, which we now call the running boom, the first running boom. And I said to myself, you know, I could make a living from this. If I could just figure out how to make a living from running, I'll be a happy camper. And I had met these guys, actually I had raced against these guys from Oregon who had started this little company called Blue Ribbon Sports, later known as Nike. And they were succeeding at selling running shoes. So I figured, you know, I want to get into that business. So graduated from college, went to work for a big department store chain. I learned retail, and then I opened my first store, which was called Starting Line Sports. I was a well-known runner in the Bay Area, in Northern California, and I went to Runner's World magazine, which was huge back then, and I asked them I wanted to open this store. They were doing a mail order business. We negotiated a deal where they let me use their 600,000 member mailing list to sell, to ship mail order catalogs to. That worked really well because we started selling running products, stopwatches, stretching books, socks. We introduced Gore-Tex to the U.S., for example, in a running suit. Casio, we introduced to the U.S. It was the Casio runner's watch. It was just made famous by runners. And that worked really well. Then I opened a second store a couple of years later. Everything was going well except for one thing. Had 2 stores. We were open 7 days a week. I was training every day and I was still racing on the weekends, and I just got married. So talk about burning a camel at both ends. I mean, that was worse than that. I'd kind of bitten off more than I could chew. And then I noticed something very interesting, that these guys that would call on me, these sales reps, were hardly working at all. They were all driving BMWs, and all they did was take me to lunch. And I kept thinking, what's wrong with this picture? I'm doing all the work, they're getting the commission, and they love Starting Line, they love my other store, Island City, but I must be on the wrong side of the fence here. So I had in my mind, started thinking about, I got to move to the other side of the wall. It's too hard, I can't sustain this. So one day, these 2 guys show up. One of them is, and they're selling this brand of shoe that I knew, because I'd had a pair in high school. I was a shoe geek, remember, every kind of shoe, I had to try it. And there was this shoe called Reebok. It was made in England in a factory about the size of this room. in Bolton, England. Family business is 1895. As a matter of fact, the founder of the company, when he was in high school in 1895, invented the track spike. This is a kid who decided to put nails through the bottom of his running pumps to have traction on a dirt track. And so Reebok was born in 1895, and it was a super elite running shoe. Reebok shoes were famous for weighing 5.5 ounces. They had no cushioning of any kind, not a jogging shoe. So the running boom was built on jogging, right? Good luck running in Reebok. Unless you were running 5-minute pace, you could not run in those shoes. And so these guys show up to my store to sell me Reebok. One of them is about 350 pounds, which clearly was not a runner. The other guy sat there making the pitch and blew smoke in my face the entire time. He was a chain smoker. And I sat through this whole thing and I said, and by the way, Reebok shoes were the most expensive running shoes in the world. They were $15 more expensive than the most expensive Nike. So I said to them simply, you guys have no chance of any kind. You know, I am the person you need to be selling to. I'm a hardcore runner. I'm a running store owner. You need space in my store, but you clearly don't know what you're talking about. Somebody may have told you what the pitch is, but you have zero credibility. So I kind of politely kicked them out. So the next morning, there they are. I go to open my store, and these two guys are standing there. And they said to me, look, we've been thinking about what you said. You're right. We need somebody with some credibility to help us do this. We'd like you to join us. So, you know, and I just told you, I was thinking about what's life like on the other side of the wall. So I went home, talked to my wife, and realized, okay, if I can get a couple of store managers, I had one, I need another one, I maybe can do this. I added to my workload. So, it's nuts. Geez, I see a pattern here. So, anyway, I joined Reebok. We were doing about, the first year we did $300,000 in sales. This was, they started in '79, I joined at the beginning of '80. And the company then grew to about $13 million in sales after 3 years, 2.5 years. We were struggling. The running shoe boom had started to plateau. Why? Because there were too many products in the market. The market had plateaued a little bit. All the brands were compressing around a fixed consumer base. Too many brands, not enough retail. So the retailers started to thin the herd. And they did it by volume. So guess which volume? We were not doing a lot of volume, but we were, you know, doing okay. So Reebok was starting to get thinned. I remember taking my territory, by the way, my first job was head of sales and marketing, and my territory was Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. Not a small territory. In a beat-up old Datsun with no air conditioning. And it took me 3 weeks to drive my territory. I was doing my territory 3 weeks of driving with my shoe bags, 1 week at home, 3 weeks of driving, 1 week at home. I did that for a year and a half, which felt like 18 years. And so I took one of those trips, and by the way, these are trips in which you eat McDonald's and stay at Motel 6. It was 100% commission. And I realized that I'd lost $140 on my trip. Now, rep, if you're a rep, how many of you grew up selling stuff? So you know, the meter's always going. You're always counting. How much did I just make on that deal? How much did I? And I'm driving, I'm really getting pissed off. You know, I'm driving back, it's a long drive back. I had a straight shot down I-5, 17 hours from Seattle to San Francisco. And I'm just obsessing over this whole thing. And it hit me on that trip. I was in Redding, California, and I stopped at a payphone. Remember those? And I called Boston, a bunch of quarters. I called the guys at Paul Fireman at Reebok, and I said, listen, if I can't sell these running shoes, nobody can. And we're hitting a wall here, and we've got to make a change, and I have an idea. And I said, look, my wife has been taking aerobics, and all the women in aerobics are barefoot. And if they're not barefoot, they're wearing ugly, bulky running shoes that don't look good with their outfits. And And why don't we make aerobic shoes that are cute, they all want to be dancer. Everybody was taking aerobics because they aspired to be a dancer. That was the optimum, right? And so I have a thought in mind for a shoe that we should make, which was built to look, it was actually a version of a track spike I'd had made of kangaroo leather. And it looked like a ballet shoe. It happened to be a track spike. And I said, we're going to use that shoe, we'll make it an aerobic shoe. Paul said, in his Boston accent, what are you, lost your mind? You know? What are you, crazy? What's aerobics? You know, and I had to explain what aerobics, it hadn't hit Boston. Aerobics hadn't hit Boston. And this is Jane Fonda had just come out, you know, all this stuff was going on. And in those days, aerobics was important because women, in those days, it was not considered feminine to sweat in public. Women in the room may remember that. It was not considered feminine to have muscles. You know, it was, what was the word? I forgot even how people referred to it as. But women weren't supposed to have muscles, they weren't supposed to sweat in public. And athletics, Title IX had been adopted in 1978, so a lot of women had never had experience with athletics or winning or being on a team or anything. You know, when I was in high school, we had GAA, Girls Athletic Association. You had to wear a skirt, a white blouse, white socks, and white keds. Remember that? That was weird. And the boys got to go play sports, and the girls had to do these silly activities that were not athletic, even though so many girls were athletes and wanted to play. So Title IX liberated people from, women particularly, from that and opened the door for girls to participate in sports just like boys. But the people who were doing aerobics had not experienced Title IX. They were older, they were in their 20s, early 30s. So athletics through aerobics was liberation, discovery of the power of physical activity. And I felt it was a movement that was coming and coming big. I had convinced myself on that drive that this is the best thing that's going to happen because women are going to discover exactly what men already know about sports. And we're going to do it through aerobics. And that's why we need an aerobic shoe. It's not about aerobics. It's about 52% of the population discovering physical activity and power through sports. And oh, by the way, women buy 8 times as many shoes as men. Fact. By the way, that was a fact. 8 times as many shoes as men. Still true. Look around your closets. Men buy shoes because they have to. Women buy shoes because they want to. It's a long story, but I'm guilty. I wear shoes out. I buy the same shoes over and over and over again. And women buy a shoe for the outfit of the season. Well, that had never happened in athletic footwear. So when we introduced our aerobic shoes, we did them in colors. We did a high top in neon orange and green. You may remember this shoe. Sybil Shepherd wore it at the Emmys one year when she came out and won. I gave her those shoes the day before on a $5 bet that she wouldn't wear them. That's well over $5. So it was an incredible thing that happened with Reebok. We went from 13 million in revenue. We introduced the aerobic shoes. We went to 65 million. From 65, we went to 350 million. From 300 million, we went to 900 million, to 1.5 billion, to like 2.3. It was the fastest growing company in the history of American business until Microsoft came along. Insane. No one had ever experienced that. We had, at one point, we couldn't get warehouse space in Boston or the Boston area. So the containers, we had a container yard. Containers were being delivered from the port, and we were unloading containers in a giant parking lot, hoping it didn't rain or snow. We went through 5 corporate offices in 3 years. It was